When a puppy struggles in the river, a brave dachshund dives in. What happens next will amaze you. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The sun cast a soft golden hue over the tranquil countryside, where a narrow river twisted gently through the fields. A playful breeze rustled the reeds by the water's edge, masking the faint sounds of distress that lingered just beyond the bend. A small figure, trembling with fear yet resolved with courage, stood by the riverbank, a tiny dachshund named Max. His sleek coat shimmered in the sunlight, his deep brown eyes scanning the rippling current. Something was wrong. Max's keen ears had picked up the faint, desperate whimper of another puppy. It wasn't just any sound, it was a cry for help. Max had never been the bravest dog in his small town, often shying away from the larger shepherds and retrievers who frequented the park. But today something stirred within him, a sense of duty that overpowered his usual hesitations. He took a hesitant step forward, the cold water lapping at his paws. Max's heart raced as he scanned the river, and there it was, a small puppy clinging to a piece of driftwood, its tiny body struggling against the rushing current. Max barked sharply, hoping someone would hear, but the fields were eerily silent. Each second felt like an eternity. The little puppy, a scruffy mutt with matted fur, was being pulled further downstream, its cries growing weaker. Max looked back at the empty fields one last time. He knew no one was coming. It was up to him now. Max didn't waste another moment. He plunged into the cold water, his small legs paddling furiously against the swift current. The icy chill was shocking, and the river's pull was stronger than he had anticipated, but his determination outweighed his fear. Every stroke brought him closer to the struggling puppy, whose tiny head barely stayed above the surface. The river seemed relentless, tossing Max to one side and then the other, but his focus never wavered. As Max reached the puppy, the little one let out a faint whimper, its energy nearly gone. Max gently bit down on the loose fur of the puppy's neck, holding on tightly but carefully, the way he had seen his mother carry him when he was small. With the puppy secured, Max turned toward the riverbank, his muscles straining against the current. The weight of the puppy made each movement harder, and for a moment, Max felt the river trying to pull him under, but the thought of giving up never crossed his mind. With a final burst of strength, Max reached the shallows, dragging himself and the puppy onto the muddy bank. Both dogs collapsed, panting heavily. Max nudged the smaller dog, who let out a weak but grateful whimper. For a moment, they simply lay there, catching their breath as the river continued its relentless journey behind them. Max knew they couldn't stay there long. The little one needed warmth, food, and safety. Looking around, Max spotted an old barn in the distance. Its faded red walls stood out against the golden fields, and smoke curled lazily from a chimney nearby. With a determined bark, Max gently nudged the puppy to its feet, signaling that they had to move. The puppy wobbled unsteadily, leaning on Max for support, but together they started their slow trek toward the barn. As the barn drew closer, Max's heart lifted with cautious hope. The faint hum of voices and the scent of a warm fire spilled out from its cracked doors. Max knew humans lived here, and though his experiences with them had been a mix of kindness and indifference, he had no choice but to trust them now. The little puppy at his side stumbled with every step, its tiny body trembling with exhaustion. Max stopped to nudge it forward, his own legs aching, but his determination unshaken. The barn doors creaked open slightly as Max pushed his nose against them, revealing a cozy interior bathed in the amber glow of a fireplace. The scent of hay and the soft clucks of chickens greeted them, along with the startled gaze of an elderly man who sat repairing a broken saddle. His hands froze as his eyes met Max's, then flicked down to the drenched and shivering puppy beside him. "Well, I'll be," the man muttered, his weathered face softening into a look of concern. He quickly set down his tools and knelt on the hay-strewn floor. "What happened to you little ones?" Max barked once, as if to explain everything, his tail wagging weakly. The old man carefully scooped up the puppy, his gentle hands cradling it like a fragile treasure. "You're in rough shape," he murmured, glancing at Max. "But you brought this little one all the way here, didn't you?" Max panted, too tired to bark again, but the man seemed to understand. He grabbed a thick blanket from a nearby pile, wrapping it around the puppy. and motioned for Max to come closer. Max hesitated for a brief moment, but the warmth of the barn and the man's kindness made him take a cautious step forward. Soon Max was wrapped in a blanket too, his damp fur beginning to dry as he felt warmth seep back into his body. The man placed the puppy near the fire and turned to Max. "You've got the heart of a lion for a little dog," he said, patting Max's head. Max's ears perked up at the tone in the man's voice. It wasn't pity or dismissal, it was respect. The puppy stirred, letting out a soft whine as its eyes fluttered open. Max patted over and nudged it reassuringly with his nose. The man watched the interaction, a small smile spreading across his face. "Looks like you two have been through something no one else could survive," he said. "Let's see about getting you some food." As the old man ladled warm broth into 2 shallow bowls, Max kept a watchful eye on the puppy, who was slowly regaining its strength. The soft crackle of the fireplace filled the barn, and for the first time since diving into the icy river, Max felt a sense of relief. The man placed the bowls on the floor, and the smell of the broth made Max's stomach rumble. He nudged the puppy toward the bowl, letting it eat first while he waited patiently. "You're something special, little guy," the man said, crouching beside Max and gently scratching behind his ears. "Not every dog would risk their life like that." The puppy slurped noisily at the broth, its tail wagging for the first time. Max allowed himself a few sips after the puppy had its fill, the warmth of the meal spreading through him like sunlight. The man pulled up a stool, watching the 2 dogs with a look of curiosity and admiration. "I wonder where you came from," he mused aloud, "and what brought you to that river." Max couldn't answer, of course, but his gaze lingered on the puppy, who was now curled up by the fire, its small body finally at peace. A faint noise outside interrupted the quiet moment, a muffled shout carried by the wind. The man frowned, standing abruptly and moving to the barn door. He peered out into the darkening sky. "Trouble's brewing," he muttered. Turning back to Max, he added, "Stay here with the pup. I'll see what's going on." Max didn't need to be told twice. He moved closer to the puppy, lying down beside it and shielding it with his body. Outside, the man's voice rose in alarm, followed by the sound of footsteps and hurried conversations. Max's ears twitched, his instincts telling him that something wasn't right. The barn door creaked open again, and the man hurried inside, his face pale. "Looks like someone's looking for this pup," he said, his voice low, "and not in a good way." Max stood protectively, his posture tense. He didn't know who these people were, but the tone in the man's voice told him they couldn't be trusted. The old man crouched beside Max, placing a hand on his head. "You've got courage, little fella," he whispered. "I think we're going to need it." The barn's cozy warmth felt like a fragile bubble about to burst as heavy footsteps approached. Max positioned himself between the puppy and the door, his small frame vibrating with both fear and determination. The old man grabbed a sturdy wooden staff from a corner and gave Max a reassuring nod. "Don't worry, boy, we'll keep them safe." The barn door slammed open, revealing 2 burly figures with harsh eyes and rough voices. "That pup belongs to us," one of them growled, pointing a thick finger toward the tiny puppy trembling by the fire. "Hand it over, old man." The old man stood his ground, his face a mask of calm defiance. "This pup barely survived the river because of this brave little Dachshund here," he said, gesturing to Max. "It's not going anywhere with the likes of you." The larger man stepped forward, his tone menacing. "You don't want to make this hard, old-timer. Give us the pup, or—" Max interrupted with a sharp, determined bark. His small size didn't matter. He stood firm, his gaze locked on the intruders. For a moment, the men hesitated, taken aback by the tiny dog's fearless stance. "Look at that," one of them sneered. "A hero, huh? Well, it won't stop us." But before the men could take another step, Max lunged forward, snapping at their boots. Startled, one of them stumbled back, cursing. At the same time, the old man swung his staff, forcing the second man to retreat. "Get out of here!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the barn. The commotion caught the attention of neighbors, whose lights flickered on in nearby homes. Shouts could be heard in the distance as people began heading toward the barn. The 2 men exchanged nervous glances before retreating into the night, muttering curses under their breath. As the barn door swung shut, Max turned to check on the puppy, who was still huddled by the fire. The old man knelt beside him, his hand trembling as he stroked Max's head. "You've got more courage than most folks I know," he said, his voice filled with pride. The neighbors soon arrived, and after hearing the story, they offered to help keep an eye out for the strangers. One woman, a kind-hearted farmer, offered to take in the puppy and give it a safe home. "You'll always be welcome to visit," she said with a warm smile. Max hesitated as the woman picked up the puppy, who gave him a soft, grateful whine. He barked once as if to say goodbye, and the puppy wagged its tail before being carried away. Max returned to the old man's side, feeling a mix of sadness and pride. "You've done your part, little hero," the man said, lifting Max into his arms. "Let's get some rest." As the barn settled back into its peaceful rhythm, Max curled up on a pile of hay by the fire, his heart finally at ease. He had saved a life, stood his ground, and found a place where he truly belonged. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage and kindness. What would you have done in Max's paws? Share your thoughts below, and let's celebrate the bravery of heroes, big or small. See you in the next story.